Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. We are now going to be touching on the series between the Orlando Magic and Cleveland Cavaliers. Feels like this series has sort of flown under the radar. Granted, each of the first four games weren't necessarily all that competitive, but it was 2-2 headed into Tuesday night, and we then finally got a really competitive Game 5 where the Cavaliers were able to edge out the Magic to take the 3-2 series lead. The home team has won in every single one of these games so far, so naturally the idea was sort of that the Cavs were going to be able to get the job done at home again, but there was the wrinkle that Jarrett Allen was dealing with a rib injury, so he actually wasn't available to play in this one. Isaac Okoro took his spot in the starting lineup, and it ended up being a really fun competitive game where I was watching the first half and the Magic really weren't getting anything done from the three-point line. They weren't shooting well. They weren't getting themselves the three-point line. They weren't getting themselves to the free throw line either, so they were relying on a lot of these mid-range shots that are just less high percentage shots, and it seemed like in my eyes that the Cavaliers were going to be able to, convincingly pull away in the second half, but Paolo Banchero is just one of the best difficult shot makers in the league in my eyes, and he hasn't necessarily gotten his shine just yet. The Magic aren't exactly the, biggest brand type of a franchise. I believe they only got one nationally televised game during the regular season, something along those lines, and people haven't really been able to watch Paolo in that national spotlight just yet, but he is absolutely incredible. He and Donovan Mitchell were just going back and forth in that fourth quarter, and it was a ton of fun to watch. He finished this game with 39 points. It was really fun to see the two-man game that it's not the prettiest thing in the world, and it's also a little bit sort of hindered because of the fact that it's not like the rest of this Magic team is very good at shooting. They're at the bottom of the league in terms of three-pointers made per game with just 11 during the regular season. I think that it marked 29th. I believe the Pistons were the only team worse. It was one of those, bottom of the lottery teams that they were just ahead of. But it was fun to see. They're starting to run a little bit more of a pick and roll game between the two of them with Paolo as the screener, at least from what I've seen. I have to track it a little bit closer as, the two continue to build off of their chemistry, but Paolo it's almost like a pick and pop because Franz is a great driver, so when he gets the mismatches, he is absolutely capable of getting himself to the rim, and he wasn't necessarily great in last night's game anyways, but it is an option there. And then Paolo, it almost looks like he likes to sort of pop out around the elbow and that free throw line for these mid-range jumpers, and he's kind of automatic with them, and he was hitting some tough fallaways, but I'm talking a lot of Magic right now, despite the fact that they did lose this game by 1 point, but again, I was just very impressed by Paolo once again. Don't think that he gets the recognition he deserves. But on the Cleveland side of this, like I mentioned, it was the show-off between Mitchell and Paolo for a lot of this fourth quarter, but the difference maker in this game was Evan Mobley. And his stat sheet isn't necessarily the most impressive thing in the world. 14 points, 13 rebounds, did have 4 assists, did have 2 steals, 2 blocks. So it's not like, you would look at that and say it's a bad game. But if you just looked at the box score, you also wouldn't necessarily understand the level of importance he played in this game, because Paolo was incredible shooting on the night as a whole, 14 of 24, 4 of 7 from 3. But when he was having trouble, it's when Evan Mobley was guarding him. I thought that he did a phenomenal job. I don't have the stats right in front of me, but the broadcast put together a graphic of the possessions where Mobley is guarding Paolo. He is really struggling. We know that Mobley has this ceiling, and his career trajectory up to this point has been a little bit weird because he was super promising as a rookie, and then they traded for Donovan Mitchell and sort of threw themselves into win now expectations where the fact that he was a little bit more limited offensively, there wasn't necessarily that same, time and development for him to be able to come into his own. Then you throw in the fact that they have Jarrett Allen as well, so it's these two big guys playing with one another. They don't necessarily have the spacing to be an elite unit offensively, and we've seen that. This was actually the first game that the Cavaliers have scored 100, the first playoff game in the past 2 seasons that the Cavs have scored over 100 points, which is a ridiculous stat given the type of era we're in with being so offensive heavy. But it's because there is absolutely a level of redundance with the Cavs, and I like every single player in their starting lineup, but I think that Garland and Mitchell are a little bit of a weird fit in the backcourt. Mobley and Allen are a little bit of a weird fit in the front court, and they just seem like they are a little bit of a redundant team. But last night, with no Jarrett Allen, we got to see Evan Mobley sort of operating the paint by himself, and I thought he was really impressive. And you've seen in some of these games the fact that he's looking to be a little bit more aggressive offensively. Now again, the stats don't necessarily pop out in a tremendous way. They already have a couple very high usage guards in Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell that his opportunities are inherently going to be a little more limited, but the fact that it does feel like he is developing at least a little bit more of a post-up game. He's at least shooting threes. Now, that's not his game, and he didn't last night, so I'm not saying this is a regular thing, but at times this series, he seemed unafraid to actually pull up. It would be nice to see him, hit more consistently, but I think that that's another part of his game that he is actively looking to build up, so that would be a huge piece for him. And I feel like his awareness of playing off of the ball, he just puts himself in better positions to actually, be an effective outlet under the basket, where, the play of the game for him was late in the game where Mobley got a dunk with just about a minute left, where Darius Garland, he drove into the paint, he drew an extra defender in Wendell Carter Jr. At the time that Garland took off, Evan Mobley was sort of on that right side along with Garland in the short corner. He sort of ran down the baseline, curled around, and just sat in the paint, and Garland was able to get him the ball off of this wraparound pass. He gets the dunk, and that was, one of the key baskets of the game. He had a couple, and then on the other end, you have the situation where he ended up getting the game-sealing block on a Franz Wagner drive and pinned him off the backboard, which basically won the game for the Cavs in this instance. It's really encouraging to see because, again, I was a big fan of Evan Mobley coming into the NBA, and after his rookie season, I was really high on him, but I feel like these past couple seasons, I had sort of sold my stock on him slightly, and I do believe it's in large part because of the fit with that Cavaliers team right now, and again, the fact that his development was sort of rushed based off of the situation there in Cleveland, but he is showing these flashes, and I'm definitely not ready to count him out. I think that he and Jarrett Allen both sort of deserve their own front courts to operate in. It's just a very clunky fit as things currently stand. The Cavaliers sort of feel like a team. I mean, there's really sneakily, and again, it's Cleveland and they're playing Orlando, so it's not a series that's necessarily in the national spotlight as much as maybe they should be, but I feel like there's a lot weighing on this series for the Cavaliers. The whole Donovan Mitchell decision, whether or not he is going to want to stay there in Cleveland. The impressions early on here are that he doesn't. He has a player option after next season. He's probably going to decline that, assuming he reaches free agency anyways, and the Cavs don't extend him. But, I think that definitely weighs on them. JB Bickerstaff is absolutely coaching for his job right now. If the Cavaliers are bounced in the first round, yet again. He knows that he is going to be out there in Cleveland, at least in my eyes. Not that I'm necessarily advocating for anybody to lose their jobs, but that does definitely feel like the consensus surrounding the Cleveland situation right now. And they would sort of be in position, I think, if they can't beat a Magic team that I've had a lot of fun watching this year. As a Celtics fan personally, I think I would rather see the Cavs than the Magic, because the Magic are, at least, they know what their identity is. They are a defensive monster, and I feel like they would be in extremely tough out. So, I only point that out to say I definitely don't underestimate the Orlando Magic. But from the Cavs' perspective here, you just sort of sold off a lot of your future to try and be competitive now, and you're going to lose to this Magic team that is sort of young, still figuring themselves out, still refining their game. This is coming off of a year where they were embarrassed by the New York Knicks in the first round last year. It seems like they would maybe be in a position for a little bit of a panic trade. Again, I say panic trade, but this is a team that I do think needs to make a move, and they probably would have made a move if it weren't for the fact that around the trade deadline, they were blazing hot when basically everybody but Donovan Mitchell was injured, and he led them on that incredible mid-season run where they were competing for the 2 seed and they were playing some really good basketball. So ultimately, I don't think we see the same iteration of this Cavs team next year, but that decision will be impacted on how the rest of this series plays out. So next game is going to be in Orlando. Like I've said, the home teams have been dominating this series up to this point. So, we'll see. History from the series up to this point would say that it is going to be the Orlando Magic, but time will tell on that one. Game 6 is on Friday, so going to be interesting to see. But that is all we really have on this segment. We're going to be taking our second break now, and when we come back, I want to dive into the Bucks-Pacers game from last night, where we saw the Bucks also able to keep their season alive. So stick with us, and we will be right back.